What is up, football fans? This is Danny Austin. You are watching and listening to the Live from the 55 podcast here from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It is Sunday, July 9th. We are recording this before the last CFL game of the weekend, Montreal and BC, but this will be dropping on Monday morning on YouTube and Apple and Spotify, all the places where you get your podcasts. It's live from 150. Nope, it's live from the 55, not the 155. That is something I am working on. Don't know why I keep making that mistake. The producers keep bringing it up. Either way, here we are. It's Sunday. It's the third day of the Calgary Stampede. So I'm still here. I'm still standing. I'm getting by. A little bit better than the Calgary Stampeders are at this point. We're going to get to them. We have Darrin Bauming from Bonfire Sports, one of my favorite people in the country, but also, in my opinion, probably the best reporter out there. This guy knows his Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He knows his Winnipeg sports and knows a ton about the CFL. So really excited to have him here. We're just going to kind of just go with it. Talk about everything we can. He was there in the stadium, watched the Bombers, to be honest, manhandle the Stampeders on Friday night. That was as bad a loss as I've seen in a long time. If you are going to ask me, am I worried about the Calgary Stampeders? The answer is absolutely yes. I think there's a real cause for concern there. That offense is not clicking the way it should. And I think that you have to wonder what's going on with the passing game, because the truth is Jake Maier has not been connecting with his receivers. Look, that's a good Bombers team, but I've seen players play a whole lot better than the Stampeders did against these Bombers, and it's, you know what, we're now 4 games into the season. They're 1-3. It's not a good situation there at all. There's a situation in Edmonton. I think that's probably that was the wildest ending to a game I've seen in a while. CJ Sims comes down, lets the ball bounce into the end zone. This is the Edmonton Elks returner, and gives up a point. Clearly didn't know the rules in Canadian football, but that basically gave the Saskatchewan Roughriders the win. What do you say about this one? I've actually been thinking about it, because the immediate thing on Twitter is obviously everyone laughs at the poor guy. Obviously it's a mistake. Obviously the player needs to know the rules. Who is that on? I mean, I don't think it's on Chris Jones. I don't think it's the head coach's job to be doing pop quizzes, making sure the players know the rules before they go out for a pivotal play. Special teams coordinator. I don't know. I just feel bad for CJ Sims. Felt bad for the Elks, to be honest. I think that they were very close to winning that game. They seem to play better against the Riders than they do other teams, based on 4 weeks of action here. But that one's tough. That's a game. Twice the Elks have sort of been on the cusp of finally getting this badly needed win, and they haven't done it. But I don't know. That was difficult, and I feel for the player. I'm just not going to pile on. If you're the Riders, I'm not sure you're really leaving this game feeling like $1 million. But I don't know. Win's a win. We got to remember that these Riders lost their last 7 games last season, coming down the stretch and missed the playoffs. They're now 3-1, and you got to like that. You got to like where you're sitting after 4 games. That's a pretty huge season over season improvement. No, I don't think they've been inspiring, but I don't think you always need to be inspiring. Again, you look at the other side of that. It's the Stampeders. As I said, 215 yards of net offense, only 127 passing yards from Jake Maier. He completed 15 of 29 passes, only averaged 4.4 yards per attempt, and it's just not good enough. And you look at their next 4 games, and they've got this coming Saturday against the Riders in Regina. That's going to be tough. July 23rd at home against Ottawa, July 30th in Montreal, and then August 4th at home against a very good Toronto Argonauts team. I'm not sure. I'm not saying, you'll have them winning a few, excuse me, but how many of those do you have them on paper, sort of a guaranteed you'd confidently put yes? Probably the Ottawa game, and that's just about all. So, yeah, the Stampeders team, not in great shape. As I've said, it's an interesting one. I've been covering the Stamps since 2016, but following them pretty closely for a good amount of time before that. And this is just this is a unique situation. This is not where the Stampeders are supposed to be. And where you expect them to be. And again, I'm going to talk to Darrin about this, so I don't want to go too into it, but I look at those standings, and yeah, the Bombers are 4-1. The Lions may be 4-1 by the time you're listening to this. And those are quite clearly the class of the West Division. And the Riders are 3-1, and the Stamps are 1-3, right? I mean, no, they're not as bad as the Elks, but they're not in the mix right now. And I think the Riders are going to like where they're at. Home game, chance to move to 4-1 and knock the Stamps down to 1-4. You know they're salivating over that in Saskatchewan. It's a big game this coming weekend. Excuse me. Beyond that, I do think that we got to talk quickly about the Tiger Cats and Red Blacks. This is not a game that I watch particularly closely. As I said, it is Calgary Stampede. I had things going on, but I've watched sort of an extended highlights package, and obviously I've read a lot about it. And you just, your thoughts and prayers, they just go out for Jeremiah Mazzoli, hurt again, lower body, non-contact injury. That is going to worry me every single time. Had to leave the game, first game back in a year. You just think Mazzoli, you go back to 2018, he was the East Division's most outstanding player. Really, really felt like the dawning of sort of a new era, and that he might be sort of one of the stars of the league. And what a player he is. And I do think he's one of the biggest players in the league. It's just how have the last couple of years played out, man. I mean, the last 5 years, I've got it written down here. Thanks to 3 Down Nation, I'm basically copying them here. But torn ACL in 2019, no season in 2020 because the CFL couldn't get on the field. Broken femur last year. It's just been a brutal 5 years for a guy who I think that a lot of us thought was gonna be sort of one of the faces of the Canadian game. And that's a quarterback who Ottawa needs too. I mean, there's that part of it where I think all of us would like the Red Blacks to be competitive, and I think Mazzoli was meant in a lot of ways to be the central piece of that. And maybe this all turns out, you do when you see non-contact lower body, you worry. But it stinks. I think they're going to have a really, really hard time the rest of this season. And they did the work. They got the pieces. It's just the pieces. There have been injuries, and I worry about that Ottawa team. I don't think they're very good. And that's just another season. I mean, Ottawa just at the bottom of the standings. It's been a couple years now. That market I trust. I love that market. It's probably my favorite place to go see a game in the East for sure. And one of my favorite places. It's such a young crowd. They've done everything right in that stadium. And you need wins, though. That's what we're seeing at Edmonton. And it's just so depressing to see a Red Blacks team that, they just need some decent quarterback play, and they're not going to get it. And you worry about that market, and then you just worry about Mazzoli. And hopefully this isn't the last time we see him on a CFL field. Hopefully he recovers. But I mean, that's basically so long, just kind of working to get back and then just have it ripped away from you. It stinks. It's sad. It sucks. I'm very sorry to hear it. So anyways, that's a bit of a bummer. Not how I would want to leave the podcast, but fortunately we have Darrin Bauming coming. So he's going to join us shortly, but I do want to very quickly thank our sponsor, Fraser and Fig. I have talked about these guys every week. They're just down the street here from our Marble Lip Studios. I meant to buy one of those charcuterie boards today. Sort of forgot that I had to tell them in advance. Either way, next time I'm going to have one. We're going to eat it here. People watching a middle-aged man eat. Who doesn't love that? Anyways, Fraser and Fig, they do these kind of elevated cheese charcuterie boxes. It's all fresh, artisanal provisions for on-demand grazing, pickup, delivery. Honestly, man, this is like ready-to-go cheese charcuterie boxes curated with local and artisanal ingredients. They've got 4 sizes. They suit every occasion. All boxes come with meat, cheese, dried fruit, fresh fruit, nuts, olives, pickles, and carrots. These things are amazing. Picnic, date, going over to mom and dad's house, or I don't know, whatever you're doing. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. You live your life. You do whatever you want. But I promise you, whatever you're doing, bring one of these Fraser and Fig cheese and charcuterie boxes, and people are going to be happy. They're going to like you. You're going to be more popular. These things are amazing. Check them out. Thank you to Fraser and Fig. Darrin Bauming, let's go. All right. What do we call you? The CEO, the owner, the operator, Bonfire Sports, Darrin Bauming.
Creator. Because that's kind of, I created it and I'm a creator there.
Yes. And yeah, you're the genius behind it. I'm pretty sure you could get stats up, unlike the geniuses, the other geniuses. Darrin, how are you? It is not Calgary Stampede where you are, so I feel like you're looking great. You didn't gain 28 pounds the way I have in the last 36 hours. You don't have bags under your eyes. You look great. It's good to have you. How is life in Winnipeg?
Good. I am 28 pounds on than I should be. That's for sure. But no stampede in Manitoba right now. Just relaxing in Winnipeg and enjoying the summer, living clean, feeling good.
I love that, man. You look great. I will say that there may not be a stampede, but the Bombers basically stampeded over the Stampeders. That game, man, I need to get your perspective because I have the Calgary perspective, and my Calgary perspective is that the wheels are falling off and that there's something seriously wrong with the Stampeders. I want, honestly, just be real. What did you see? Was there anything that you thought offensively the Stampeders was encouraging?
I'll get into the offense. My first take on the game was after watching Edmonton and Saskatchewan just slog one out in the most, not a positive type of slog. Sometimes, that can be the case in a game of football. But after watching that game the night before, and yeah, there was a dramatic finish because of a blunder of epic proportions, and Edmonton just finding new ways to beat themselves. When it was, a hockey score in the football game between Calgary and Winnipeg, and 11-1 Winnipeg was down, I really wondered. I'm like, are we in store for like one of those CFL weeks? Like, is CFL week 5 of 2023 going to be that week where it's just ridiculously low scoring games? And of course, all 4 of those games will be on CBS Sportsnet across the continent. But yeah, I mean, Winnipeg has something in their DNA where it doesn't matter what the score is. And like the football players, coaches, athletes in general, they throw the cliches out there all the time. Flush it and move on. Can only worry about the next play. Can't do anything about the last one. It's 0-0. We're trying to go 1-0 every week. All of that. But there's something in the Blue Bombers DNA that just has them. They embody resolve. They are so resilient. They're never, ever out of the fight. And it's the body language that they exude. It's, the way they approach halftime. It's the way they approach offense and defense and strategy within the game. So I think covering this team closely in the Mike O'Shea era, we've learned that. We've learned you can't really ever count them out.
It was the same, like the Stampeders 2016-18 had that aura as well.
Yeah.
That just like it didn't matter. And the only way to beat this Bombers team is to get ahead early because you need to force them into throwing the ball and not having all their weapons. Mm-hmm. But then it doesn't actually matter. Like,
right. And the point I was trying to get to is, that's what we know about the Blue Bombers, but it was the Calgary Stampeders' inability to put their foot on Winnipeg's throat, their inability to take advantage of the momentum that they had. They missed out on a lot of opportunities to, take better control of that game, and they let Winnipeg come back. Winnipeg's going to come back. They're a scrappy team. That resolve is real. But the Stamps, with the way they were pass rushing, like James Vaughters, he had 2 sacks in the first half. You were talking to me about Mike Rose on Bonfire Sports this past week and, how he's a double team machine. Well, they put him in single situations and he was pushing guys around and wreaking havoc. But the run game from Calgary's offense, the inability for Jake Maier to, take advantage of Winnipeg's more kind of passive sit back defense in the pass game. I'm a little bit confounded by the Stamps because they have all this weaponry, they have all this ability, they have all this coaching experience and, proven ability. I really don't understand why they're struggling as much as they are. But at 1-3, looking up at Sask and BC and Winnipeg, who are all 3-1 or 4-1 in Winnipeg's case, it really makes you wonder.
Because if you were to read my emails or my DMs, it is a bunch of people saying the problem is Jake Maier.
Okay.
And look, I don't think he's been good enough this year, and I don't think he was good enough, and I'm not going to hesitate to say that. I also you have relationships with people, so in this more sort of editorial space, I do have to be a little bit careful.
Sure.
But I agree. It was also though, and it's not for the first time this year, they just they seem to settle. This is a thing that Derek Taylor has talked about. They just seem to settle for getting two yards less than they need all the time.
Hmm.
With Bo Levi Mitchell, if you needed 10 yards, and this is in his prime, I'm not saying last year, he got you 10 yards. But the Stamps, it always seems like they get 7 or 8 instead of the 10. They're always just short of that first down. And then, yeah, I mean, the run game, like Dedrick Mills is amazing, but it felt predictable.
Hmm.
And I hate just bringing things down to stuff like, oh, it's accuracy. But they just didn't. 122 passing yards is not enough.
No.
This is the CFL.
And Dedrick Mills was excellent. He had 7 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown in the first quarter. And then they didn't really go to him much after that. And I understand, state of the game and flow of the game and that sort of thing. They dictate play calling and utilization of different players on offense and the rest. But, to your point about getting 7 or 8 yards when you need 10, or getting 12 yards when you need 15 on 2nd and 15 or something like that. I have a theory about that in the CFL. It's a big field, right? So defensive strategy, I've been told, is very different because the space is what you're defending, not the players so much, right? Zone is very different. You have a high safety and 3 linebackers. You get the dime backer who's a DB and the middle and the weak side. So things are a little bit different, especially with blitz packages and that sort of thing. But I saw it here in Winnipeg with Matt Nichols, and it was the exact same, the exact same perspective from fans that you're getting in your DMs and your emails right now. Matt Nichols is the problem, and how come they only get 7 yards when they need 9 or 10, right? And I think it is an operation of the defense. I don't think it's the operation of the offense when fans will say they're only throwing it 7 yards downfield. That's what's there because the defense is defending well where they need to, and that is the 10 yards that they cannot allow in order to stop the drive. So I think it's more about a team just not playing well, not, they're not dangerous. They're not a threat. So a defense can defend a certain way and say, go ahead, take the 9 yards. We don't care. You need 15. Take the 7 yards. You need 10. I don't think it's bad play calling or necessarily bad decision-making by the quarterback. I think they're going to the option that's there, and that's the option that the defense maybe has let them to. And they're hoping for a receiver or a running back to make a play, make a guy miss, have the defender make a mistake, and then maybe you'll pick up the first down. But, we need to see more from the Stampeders. I like the offensive line. I like the run game when it's effective or when it's at least utilized. They got a ton of good receivers, even though, Malik Henry is injured right now, and Luther Kanavanu and the rest, getting Mark and Michelle and then Reggie Bagleton back. Everything's in place. I don't know why they can't put it together.
Yeah, and I do think that there is an accuracy issue a little bit with Jake now. I do think that he is missing, particularly he's missing long on a lot of passes, and I get it. I didn't like the interception early either, but that's the type of thing that you have happen. And I got to give the Bombers credit, for all of this talk. If you're a young quarterback and you have Willie Jefferson just closing in on you,
yeah,
it's a hard job. It's a really hard job. And that Bombers team, not only do they bring that pressure, but they also have some incredibly complicated schemes that completely confuse quarterbacks' eyes. And that is something that as Jake progresses and learns, he'll presumably get better at. But I am looking at it, and I'm sorry. I think that we'll see the Lions tonight. I'm assuming Vernon Adams bounces back from last week, and I assume, and then I know the Bombers are going to end up with 13 wins, maybe more. That's sort of who they are.
I think that the game plan is more known today in 2023 than it has been over the last couple of years, because we've seen Winnipeg get beaten. We've seen Winnipeg, lose important big games, and we've seen them lose different ways too. So, they got blown out by the BC Lions this year at home, where Winnipeg had not lost to a Western Division team in 5 years. Montreal came in here and won once. That was a weird game. And then the Toronto Argonauts beat them quite handily as well.
Was Nick Carbuckle the starter in that game for the Argos?
I'm not. No, it was McLeod Bethel-Thompson.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. But regardless, I think the game plan is out there. Defensive and offensive coordinators, head coaches, the guys that put the game plans together, I think they have a better handle on how to take on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers than they have in years past. So it's going to be a 13-win season. I don't know, maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen. It's the crazy football league. It's the CFL.
Completely. I just watching that game. It's like, it's true, the game planning and all of that. And there was just and again, I think the Stampeders defense, to be perfectly honest with you, like that game's not on them. I mean, like, what are you going to do with an interception, a huge special teams play? By and large, I mean, take those two, the points that come from that off the board.
Yeah.
And you're very, very happy with the Stampeders
and
defense.
I think,
it's just there was a difference in execution, and that's always my thing with the Bombers is like when you talk about the resilience and all that, there's also just like you can't do that without, and this is such a cliche, but at some point it's the details that allow you to be resilient.
Yeah.
And just as I watch the Bombers, yes, they looked bad against the Lions in that one game. It's just I have that faith, and I've just watched so much Bombers over the last couple of years, and I was just like, as I watched it, I was like, I know what's coming. Play after play, I know what's coming, and I know it's going to work.
Yeah. Well, you know me, Danny, and you've followed my work. We've been buddies for years now, but I've covered the Blue Bombers daily since 2011, right? When Paul LaPolice was the head coach the first time. And, I'm a born and raised Winnipegger and played football in this community, right? And I don't want people to think that I'm just, unabashed homer or something like that, right? I approach my job seriously and try to be objective. So, the Blue Bombers are very good. And I think anybody, the most objective person in the world, could rave on and on about, how they're going to be difficult to beat and the rest. What I'm fascinated with as a reporter is how teams play against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I was impressed with the Stampeders. Like, they put a ton of pressure on their offense, on Winnipeg's
defense is good.
Early. The defense was really good. But as much as said about Zach Collaros and the Blue Bombers offense, like two-time reigning MOPs, probably still the best player in the league today, from what we've seen through 5 weeks. But if it wasn't for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense, it's been their defense that has, buoyed them when they've been, treading water or struggling to keep their head above water in games.
One of either Dave Dickinson or Bo Levi Mitchell said to me last year, I was like, what is the key? And he was like, they're well coached. Went through the list, and they were like, also though, as long as Willie Jefferson and Adam Bighill are there, they will have the best defense in the league.
Yeah. And is Adam Bighill the same player he was, 3-4 years ago when he was or what was that, 2-3 years ago when he was the most outstanding defensive player in the league? Maybe not, but he's still incredibly effective. He is the quarterback of the defense. He's right there in the middle, calling the coverages and using his eyes, which I think are his best weapon, physical.
Size in his brain, 100%. He's just so smart out there. He's so smart.
And you mentioned Willie Jefferson. Well, Willie Jefferson is a unicorn in that there's nobody built like him, and there's nobody that plays the game like him. And he's a tool that Richie Hall, Winnipeg's defensive coordinator, has used in so many different ways. There's a reason Willie Jefferson as a D end has a whole bunch of pick sixes in his career, because he can drop into coverage. He can jump. His arms are so long. He's strong. He can bull rush. He can do all these different things. But it's one thing to game plan against Willie Jefferson. It's another when you have Jackson Jeffcoat and Celestin Haba, an outstanding rookie. He's been very, very good for Winnipeg this year, on a rotation of defensive linemen and defensive ends that are just outstanding. I think that makes it really, really tough. All of that said, though, Danny, is the moment in that game that really stood out to me. And on our post-game show, we always do our bonfire burning point. We don't do any turning point. We do the bonfire burning point. And our burning point was the Rene Paredes missed field goal. Yeah. Now, my co-hosts felt it was, the subsequent return. I felt it was the missed field goal, because I think that game, that would have gone a very, very different way. Yes, obviously having your backup kick returner in for the injured Janarian Grant and seeing Greg McCrae go, 102 yards on a return and probably add another 40 or 50 yards on the east-west that he ran and running out of gas, that set up Winnipeg for another field goal and another score. But man, if Paredes hits that, and we've seen him hit it so many times, completely different ball game in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 6-point swing, if nothing else, right? Yeah, it's so, I hear you. I just look at the box score, and there are sometimes when the box score tells me the whole story, and I say 122 passing yards. And you talked about how they got away from the run, and I hear you, but it's like, yes, there's situational football. When you're behind, you typically run the ball less. And I'm not criticizing the play calling. I could not be a football head coach. I couldn't be a football anything coach. But like when you are getting more yards on your runs than your passes, at some point, stick with the run a little bit.
Sure. I thought Winnipeg, like just to counter that on the same point, Winnipeg, often they'll say set up the run or use the run to set up the pass. What Winnipeg did was kind of the opposite. They tried running with Brady Oliveira in the first half and had a lot of trouble. Like Calgary's defense, their game plan in the first half, like before, I'm sure each of them made adjustments at halftime, was excellent. And they couldn't get Brady Oliveira going. Now, Brady Oliveira's got 200-yard games already this year. He finished with 73, I think, against the Stamps. But, he's a 130-yard total yard producer every week now. Like Andrew Harris from Winnipeg, went to Oak Park High School, star with BC, and of course his hometown Bombers. Brady Oliveira, Oak Park High School, Winnipegger, and now starring with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The comparisons are there as much as Brady Oliveira is, blazing his own path and to start him in the CFL. All of that said, when Winnipeg had the pass going and then started running, that's when, like I described it in my post game as it was like a boa constrictor. Winnipeg put together a 15-play, 96-yard drive that spanned 9 minutes, 43 seconds. They said, we are going to take the fourth quarter away from the Stampeders and just lock it down. And Brady Oliveira, a couple passes in there, but a lot of run to Rashid Bailey and, short pass game when, in certain situations. But Brady Oliveira was like, 60, 62 or something like that. He was roughly 60 yards of that 96-yard drive, just pounding the football. The offensive line might have had trouble with pass protection in the first half, but they just bore down and got physical and smacked Calgary in the mouth with just an unbelievably physical run game to kill the clock at the end. Yeah,
it's not always the most entertaining thing if you're a neutral fan watching a team do that, but it's how you win football games, right? Yeah, again, as I was saying, it's that thing when you don't watch Winnipeg as closely. Like I typically watch the Bombers. I mean, I see every game, but I'm watching as a fan. I'll have it on while I'm working or doing other stuff. And it's then when I do have to focus in on it. Like, and I can't quantify this, but it's the inevitability. It's that, they need to take 9 minutes off the clock and they're just kind of going to do it. And I've just seen it so much over the last 4 years. And to be honest, I don't like it. Like, it drives me nuts. I want there to be a team that comes in and knocks them off. And we've seen them lose, right? Like, it's not as if we haven't seen them lose. But that feeling of like, here we go again. Okay, the Bombers are coming. They control this. It's big brothering the teams a little bit.
Yeah.
And
I like that.
And I just feel it and I see it and I know what's happening. And in part because the Stamps have had so many close games. This was not a classic Stampeders Bombers game. Full marks. This was a Bombers. This win 24-11. I thought it was more dominant than the scoreline, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, it was 11-1, right? And Winnipeg's defense just said, "Oh no more." Right? You want to beat us? Beat us with Jake Mayer's arm, and he couldn't. Like, he couldn't even put up a decent fight. And I completely understand the fan sentiment that that is the problem. I'm not enough of a offensive expert to just outwardly say responsibly it's on the quarterback, right? I know there's a lot more that goes into offensive prowess than just one player. Is he the most important? Yes. Mm-hmm. If he was a gunslinger, If he was, if it was Zach Collaros, in front of that offensive line or behind that offensive line and using that run game and those receivers, would it be different? For sure it would. I have no doubt. But I'm not going to just say, hey, this is a Jake Mayer problem, and they gotta figure something
It's
out.
reductive, and it's part of our job in media to not do that.
Yep.
And I think it's important that not happen. I will say, just I've watched a lot of Jake, and I do think that when he's on, he's really on. Like he's just a bit, to be honest, he's a bit streaky, and I don't always like using that word. But when he's off, he does look. It looks bad when it's not working for him.
Well,
and that's unfortunate.
There's streaky quarterbacks in the CFL, right? Remember Henry Burris? It was good Hank, bad Hank.
Yep.
Right. And it's, Trevor Harris. We've seen good and bad of him as well, kind of, really throwing some playoff games away, through his career. Vernon Adams Jr., the most recent, because he comes into Winnipeg and lays the boots to the best team in the league. And then the next week he throws 6 picks and 2, I don't know what was going on, but he appeared to have time and his eyes clear and everything, and just gifted it to the Toronto Argonauts, all while throwing for 355 yards.
It's the weirdest stat line.
388 yards.
I know.
Like, it's weird to see this happen, but it is, the most difficult position to play in team sports for sure. So, who knows what goes into finding that consistency in the great quarterbacks that we've seen in both leagues and everywhere.
I was talking to Ted Wyman about this, and one of the things that I thought it was a really, really good point, where he said, look around the league and look at how old is Vernon Adams Jr. It's sort of taken him to this point now, but it takes a while with young quarterbacks, and that there needs to be patience, and that you do need to just look, Zach's in his mid-30s. Trevor Harris is in his mid-30s. It typically, your average 24-year-old is not a starting CFL quarterback who's having a tremendous amount of success in today's day and age. And that's why, with the stuff with Jake in particular, it bugs me a little bit, because I don't think Calgarians are used to having a quarterback who they need to be patient with.
Right.
It's been so long, and he's not Jeff Garcia, he's not Doug Flutie, but that doesn't mean that there's not good things there. I want to quickly, because we try on these days to talk about each game. You obviously watched Edmonton, Saskatchewan. I don't really have much to say about the ending beyond I feel bad for the player and everyone who won this one. I said this in the intro, but people being Chris Jones, what a terrible. I know that accountability always goes through the head coach. I don't actually think it's the head coach's job to check to make sure that your returner knows that rule.
I don't think you would get away saying that to Mike O'Shea. By saying that, I mean sharing that sentiment, because
it's not on the special teams coordinator.
I think it's on the entire staff, and of course the accountability goes to the head coach. What I don't understand is, a lot of people saying oh, Chris Jones is yelling at him after making that mistake. I don't think he was yelling at him. I think he was, communicating to him you can't do that. You can't do that. But also, it's on Chris Jones. It's on the special teams coordinator, sure. But the buck stops at the head coach. And I know Jones has got a lot on his plate with being the GM, the head coach, the defensive coordinator. But who's the one talking to him after that play? It's him. He's the one that went up to him and talked to Sims. So if you bounce that idea off of someone like Mike O'Shea, just as a theoretical, I don't think he would say, in his heart of hearts, in true honesty, that it was anybody's fault but the coach or the coaching staff to have that player prepared. That player was not prepared because they did not know what to do late in the game. And whether that is something installed in them, as a young player new to the Canadian game, or during training camp, or during their meetings during the week, or before they run out onto the field. Hey, this goes over your head. You got to get it out, kick it out. Clearly they didn't know what the rule was. And I feel bad for the players, because the Edmonton Elks, a lot of things are going wrong for them right now, but their coaching staff is not preparing them to win at all.
Yeah. And to use, I agree with you. And look, it's not working in Edmonton, and I want it to work in Edmonton. I want them to start winning games. I think it's really bad for the CFL that they're not winning games. I think it was more I am not a very good cook. And occasionally I will be cooking, and I'll be looking at a recipe and whoever wrote the recipe didn't include something because of course they didn't need to tell me to
Mhm.
to take the egg out of the wrapper or sorry, to take the butter out of the
Right.
like, of course anyone would do that. And I just didn't know, so I didn't do it. And I'm like, I'm such an inexperienced cook that the recipe writers, like, I'm so bad that they can't even anticipate me not knowing what I don't know. And there was a level where I'm like, Chris Jones has a million things going on. He might say this falls on me, but like, I'm pretty sure he was like, in his heart of hearts, I think he would be like, I didn't know I needed to tell him that.
Well,
'Cause
I,
that's the thing. That's the first thing you need to
yeah,
know.
yeah, no,
And I feel that there are too many people right now, and this is not going to be a popular thing. Everyone wants Chris Jones to fail, at least in Calgary, and he's getting blamed for everything.
sure.
And until someone tells me, like, oh, you want to fire Chris Jones? Who's going to do all of that
Can't
under
do
the
it during the season.
CFL's salary? You cannot, like, and
Can't do it during the season. How
I
do you
feel
fire
bad for him a little
your
bit.
GM, head coach, and defensive coordinator in one phone call or one sit down meeting? Right,
Mhm.
one pink slip. You can't. What like I'm personally of the thought that I think it's foolhardy to fire a head coach during the season or fire a coordinator without a competent, experienced person to step in. The coaching cap and all of that notwithstanding, it's very difficult to take a football team and just completely change their direction mid-season. So I hear what you're saying. I just we got to remember a lot of these guys are 24, 25, 26 years old. And until like a year ago or 2 years ago, or in some cases 3 months ago, they'd never even stepped in Canada or seen 12 on 12 football.
That's actually a
So,
good point because it is
you know,
something that they might not know. So
yeah,
that's where my
absolutely.
whole weird egg analogy or butter analogy falls apart. Is that like, no, it's actually something you're aware that you need to teach
Well,
American.
if you've never cooked with an artichoke before and you don't know how to, like, I don't know how to open an artichoke. I don't know how to do that. Right. I'm going to need, artichoke dip for dummies. That's what I'm going to need.
Yes.
But it's part of, preparing these guys. A lot of work goes into being a football coach.
You
But if
should
you're
host
going
this show because artichoke dip for dummies was so much better than my egg in a wrapper.
to, well, you got my creativity spinning a little bit there.
Man, I don't know what the riders are. I'm just going to say that real quickly coming out of that game. Like, you're not leaving a 12-11 win over the Elks feeling good about yourself
At home.
at home.
Yeah.
But also, you're 3-1. I said this in the intro. They lost their last 7 games last year. At some point, it's about wins or losses. They're 3-1. I think they're going to be happy with where they are in the standings. And if you're a Riders fan, I can't imagine you're particularly happy with the performances right now.
No, because you're looking at the Calgary Stampeders and you're like, sheesh, we got 3 wins and 1 loss, not 1 win and 3 losses. Everybody outside of Edmonton is in the fight. I believe that. I don't think Calgary is written off for the season. I understand, a lot of people might think that or feel that that's what's going to happen. But I'm not writing anybody off until, August at the earliest. Even if you're a 1-win football team. What are the Riders? I don't know. I don't know what their schedule is upcoming. I know they have, the back-to-back against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Labor Day and the Banjo Bowl, as we always enjoy. And, we'll see how they get through that. But, injuries play a factor. I think at the core, though, they're incredibly talented on defense. They have a really strong run game to balance out the arm-heavy attack of Trevor Harris. But when we were talking about consistency and having bad games or bad stretches, Trevor Harris is a name that comes up. So we'll see. I mean, this is the best part about the CFL. You play a whole bunch of games. You got 3 bye weeks, and you don't really know what's going to happen until September rolls around.
It's weird for me to be celebrating like the quote unquote return of the Riders. Like, that's not really what I'm trying to do, except that last year was such a circus.
Yeah.
That it just seems like there's a quiet in Saskatchewan a little bit right now. And I think I like that. It's nice to have them back. I do think, I'm not writing anybody off. As you said, like, you look at the Labor Day games. If you're Sask, you got 2 against Winnipeg. If you're Calgary, you got 2 against the Elks. You'd rather have one of those schedules than the other, for sure, right? So that's how quickly this can flip. Is you win your 2 Labor Day games, and suddenly the Stamps are 500 again. The Riders have lost their 2 games above 500 cushion, just like that. So you're 100% right there. I like having them back, and I like that it doesn't feel like a complete nightmare.
Well, and I was worried if it was going to be a complete nightmare because we knew going into the season it was the last year on the contracts of head coach Craig Dickinson and general manager Jeremy O'Day, and it was a quarterback change. And I understand they fired Jason Moss early in the process of it all, but a lot of changes. But they've done enough, and they're finding enough to get wins. And look, a 1-point win at home against Edmonton is the same as the BC Lions coming into IG Field and clobbering the Blue Bombers. It's 2 points, and you're on to the next. So
the Stamps
lost. Good on the Riders. Good on them.
That's the thing. And the Stamps, again, as to your point, the Stamps lost in double overtime on an interception against the Riders.
Yep.
That's one play that if it goes the other way, both of those teams are 500. Final thing, man, that hurt me. Seeing what happened to Jeremiah Mazzoli. Breaks my heart. Honestly, just I was 3 down. I was reading their article on it this morning, and they just went through 2018. This guy is the most outstanding player in the East Division. 2019 ACL, no season in 2020. 2021's a bit of a weird year. Him and Dane are in and out, and then broken femur last year, and what looked like a pretty serious lower body injury this year. It's just. One of the guys who should be one of the biggest stars in the league, one of the faces of the league, that's his 5 years. It's been awful.
Yeah. And, I was reading this morning too, and then I'm like, you know what? I want to see how old he is. And he turns 35 next month. And it makes you wonder, okay, he has a non-contact injury this season, first game back, 12 months to the day from a cheap shot injury to the lower body, to the other leg. And then just, as you mentioned, 2019, another non-contact injury that happened against the Blue Bombers. So I've been such a fan of Jeremiah Masoli because to me, he's a little bit different, right? Like, he's not like a lot of quarterbacks we've seen in the CFL. He doesn't look like a lot of the quarterbacks we've seen, the way everything kind of went in Hamilton over the last few years with Dane Evans and losing his job and going to free agency, I was always kind of just, silently pulling for him, right? Like, I really like watching him play, and like that's just the fan in me, right? That's just the observer of the league in me. On a personal level, I get that a lot of people are like, hey, it's just football, nobody died, but it is his life. It has been his life for a long time. To have his mom there in the stands and his daughter, and to see that emotion on his mother's face, that was as heartbreaking as anything. Because if anybody knows how hard it is to come back from an injury, like over 12 months, and then to fight tooth and nail to get back and help your struggling franchise, get back on track, and to have it happen like that, like in the, when it did, it's just unbelievably heartbreaking. And the outpouring of support from across the league, players, coaches, fans, obviously, has been outstanding. I think that probably helps Jeremiah a little bit in this next phase, the mental part of it. But business wise, you have to wonder, is it in his best interest to get back into the grind of trying to return? Because that's what he has been doing for the last 12 months. Every day and every night he's gone to bed, and every day he wakes up in the morning, it is about getting healthy and recovering to play football again.
And it's tedious, hard work recovering from
question.
an injury like that. It is painful what you have to put your body through to get it back. And I remember years ago, a guy named Darrin Mayo, who was a St. Peter's player. He's actually, I believe, now in New England as sort of a strength and conditioning, but he had a brutal injury. And he basically had said to me, like, you guys think it's recovering the way a human. He's like, we have to go through so much more. He's like, if I just had an office job, I'd have been good 6 months ago.
Yep.
I now have to rebuild everything, and it hurts and it's painful. And he said, past a certain age, I'm just not willing to do it.
Right.
I'm not willing to go through it again. And I honestly, I would not fault Jeremiah Masoli if he decided not to go through that process again. I hope just me as a football fan and me as a fan of Canadian football, our league gets better with Jeremiah Masoli in it. So I'd love
No
to see him on the
question.
field again. But man, 2 straight years of rehab, that lonely work.
Yeah.
I at that age, man, maybe you just want to spend time with your kids and move on to start doing something else. And I can't blame you for that. So,
Yeah.
you know,
But that's what's so heartbreaking to me is because I think Jeremiah Masoli, like specifically Jeremiah Masoli, was somebody who preseason be like, I think this is an MOP candidate,
Yep.
right? Like he's in that conversation. Everyone's like, who are the best quarterbacks in the CFL? Well, there's Zach Collaros and nobody else. No, I always interjected at that point and said, don't sleep on Jeremiah Masoli.
No.
You know, he didn't get an opportunity to do it in year one with Ottawa last year because he was injured so early. And then, I mean, we didn't know what happened last night until last night. But that's where I regard Jeremiah Masoli. I don't know him personally. A lot has been said and written and shared on social media, you know, since that injury on Saturday night. But as a football player, man, like full respect to him and his game. I sure hope he can return if he wants to.
Well, no, and I mean, it's why I sort of led with that freedom thing is it's just, it honestly has been 5 years now. And that's like, I mean, again, 2018, the Stamps won the Grey Cup. So it's sort of a big year in my career. And I can't believe it's been 5 years. The pandemic threw it all off. But like,
Yeah.
That's what worries me about Masoli is that at a certain point, and this is not a knock on him, but like it's been a long time since we've seen him week in and week out for a full season at that level. And with everything that his body's been through, it's not just about whether it's worth it. It is on a certain, like, can he do it? I don't know that I'd want to.
They said the same things about Zach Collaros, right?
Very true.
And
I said the same things about Zach Collaros.
Yeah, we all did. You know, we all wondered. And head injuries are one thing compared to, you know, getting surgery to repair a soft tissue thing or whatever, right? It's a different thing. But, you know, I wouldn't put it past any of these guys. They're pro athletes playing, you know, elite level football from a very young age, being in the NCAA, playing the hardest position in team sports, being a pro for the better part of a decade into their 30s. And I wouldn't put anything past them if they put their mind to it, you know?
No doubt. That's a good perspective. And I don't know. I'm going to let you go here. It's just, I think both of us, we care about Jeremiah and wish him well in his recovery, and it stinks. And I have no idea what Ottawa is going to do for the rest of the year. That's an independent of the actual human side where we just care about a man. Like, I am very worried about Ottawa at this point. That team may be really bad.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the fans are feeling it right now too, because everyone talks about the winless streak in Edmonton. Ottawa hasn't, you know, they got that win last week, and then, you know, now you got to wonder what direction they're going.
Yeah, and it did. I will say that, like, part of it is that there was this I come down because they beat Edmonton last week, looked pretty good. Masoli was back, and I thought to myself, okay, cool. This great football market, great stadium, love going there. Maybe the climb is finally here, and then it sort of felt like it crashed a little bit. Dude, Bonfire Sports, where can people find you? You are honestly, you're the best of this. So just give me your pitch.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Danny. Most of our content, well, all of our content is on YouTube. You can find us on your podcast app. You search Bonfire Sports Winnipeg, but bonfiresports.ca. bonfiresports.ca. The website has links to everything, but pregame, postgame, Bombers coverage. We got a show live Wednesday nights, 7:30 Central, where we kind of go around the league and talk a little bit of, all on all of the teams, and then get into the Blue Bombers as well. But we bring in players and guests and, you know, smart guys like you too out west, Danny. So appreciate that. And I sure hope we can have you on again soon.
Yeah, man. Literally anytime. I will always say yes. I like, we've got this sort of home and home thing going every once in a while here. It's a good thing. And I will say, like, you are one of the people we've talked about this a lot, but I know that both of us sort of just felt like we wanted to do this, you know. I felt like there was a little bit, this is what I don't know if this is what people want, but it's what I want. I just want people talking about football who know what they're talking about. Probably not normally on the Sunday after Stampede. um, but buddy, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Anytime, man. Talk soon.
All right. Thank you again to Darrin. Honestly, I could listen to that guy talk football. I think he's the smartest. Really saved me when I got a little bit lost about talking about eggs in a wrapper. Don't know what was happening there. That was not a good analogy. Thank you to Darrin coming in off the top rope. Some artichoke talk. It was good stuff. But yeah, do check out Darrin on Bonfire, and make sure you check out Fraser and Fig, our sponsors. They do delicious elevated cheese and charcuterie. It's made with fresh artisanal provisions, on-demand grazing. You can get it picked up. You can get it delivered. I have said this a million times, and I will continue to. I intend on having one of these charcuterie boxes in the studio next time that I'm here. I did say that last episode. I didn't get organized. That's the reality. That's on me. It is Stampede. You got to give me a little bit of a break here. Either way, Fraser and Fig that are ready to go. Cheese and charcuterie boxes curated with local and artisanal ingredients. They offer 4 sizes for every occasion. All the boxes come with meat, cheese, dried fruit, fresh fruit, nuts, olives, pickles, and carrots. And their selections vary month to month. So, just because you've had it once doesn't mean it's going to be the same every time. It's awesome. We love Fraser and Fig. Thank you so much. Thank you to Darrin Bauming. Exciting week. CFL action coming up. We will know by the time this is out what happened with the Alouettes and the Lions. But yeah, Hamilton and Edmonton on July 13th. That's less exciting. Toronto, Montreal. I'm a big fan of this Argos team. I've said the number numerous times, so excited to see that. Ottawa, Winnipeg. All jokes aside, that's probably not going to be very good. This is a weird week of games, guys. Calgary, Saskatchewan to finish it off on Saturday. That one is that's a fun. That'll be an interesting game. Calgary really needs a win. The Riders would love to kind of put their foot down and not finish them off, but make life a lot more difficult for the Stampeders. Man, I'm not talking great today. We got to work on this, but yeah. I don't know. That's a strange week slate of games for week 6, but there's probably some magic in there. We'll be watching them either way. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If that's what you're doing, please like and subscribe. Live from the 55, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, we're everywhere. Guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Have a good one.